Hey everyone, welcome back to Ontario Gardening. Today I am going to discuss common mistakes that are made in gardens that hopefully with this video we can avoid. That's not to say you're going to avoid them because this happens to new gardeners, but it also happens to experienced gardeners. I make mistakes every single year. I'm going to actually talk when I'm done telling you some pointers, some of the mistakes that I made just in this past 2022 season. And some of them are like, I knew better. What am I doing? Anyways, the first mistake that happens a lot and is very common is people start their seeds inside way too early. And I get it. I am just as bad. The minute you have a little bit of a nice day and you don't see snow anymore or those cold temperatures, you're like, yes, I'm starting seeds. Do not do it. Avoid the temptation. Next thing you know, you have tomato plants that are like 3 feet tall and they're already starting to produce flowers, which is not good. We do not want them to be producing anything inside before we get them outside. And you've got these huge transplants that are just kind of going to go out there and they're not going to do as well because you've started them inside and they started thinking that they needed to produce flowers way too early. So try to avoid starting seeds too early. I am going to, in the next couple videos, recap on, I'll link the description below of a video that I'm going to do about using a planting tool guide. And it's a couple different websites with a couple different guides and tools, as depending on what you like, on when to plant. The seed packet will also tell you on the back, like plant or start inside 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. So don't start them any sooner than that. Try and take the recommendations if you can and just hold off because you'll be thankful in the end. Number 2, once you get those transplants done and ready, a lot of people don't transplant their seedlings properly. And what I mean by this is they just take them and throw them out into the garden. Can it be done? For sure. I never used to harden off my seedlings back in the day, but I actually had a lot more failure back then than I do now. So what I mean by hardening off your plants, I will link that in the description below as well. I have a whole video on how to do it. Super easy. Basically, all it's just saying is you're taking these plants that are used to indoor conditions, the indoor lights, being coddled in the greenhouse and the indoor temperatures, and then all of a sudden you're throwing them outside into direct sunlight and where there's wind and weather elements, and they don't know how to adjust. And sometimes they will die, sometimes they won't produce anything, and so you want to try and avoid that. So that's the second mistake is not kind of taking care of your seedlings once you get them to grow, not taking care of them once we get them outside. If we can avoid death, that's awesome. Number 3, not knowing the plant that they are planting. So you don't have the information on it. You don't know how to care for it once it's out in the garden or once it starts growing from direct seed. And ultimately you fail because you just have no idea what this plant really needs to either produce a lot or produce well. So that's another mistake that people make, is not knowing exactly what they're planting or having absolutely no idea. There is so much information at our fingertips now. YouTube, Google, books. The back of the seed packet a lot of the times will tell you how to care for these plants. Just take the time to just even know what it likes to eat, or how long it takes to grow, so that you know what to look for in those plants. Number 4, planting certain plants at the wrong time. So there are cool weather crops and there are warm weather crops. So your cool weather crops that tolerate frost or like cooler conditions would be things like lettuce, spinach, your brassicas, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, that sort of thing. Those plants thrive in cooler conditions, shade, that type of environment. They can't stand full sun. They hate the heat. So those type of things, like if you were to plant a lettuce, boom, in the middle of summer, it's likely that it's going to have a really hard time growing, or it's going to bolt and go to seed and think it's done and try and produce seeds, and you're not going to get a great lettuce. I know a lot of people in like Florida and stuff, from what I talk to, like my gardener friends there, they don't even really bother to try and grow lettuce unless they can do it like inside, more like on the cool, because they have such a hard time. So just knowing when to plant those plants, because that's another mistake that people make is they go and they plant that lettuce in the middle of the summer and now they can't get it to grow, and you have not only wasted your time, you have wasted a seed, and we don't want to waste, which is ultimately money, and we don't want to do that. Another mistake is not feeding your soil. No one told me when I first started gardening how important it was to have good soil and have good nutrients in your soil for your plants to feed up and feed those roots and up and into the plant. We sometimes as new gardeners think that we're doing such a good job feeding just the plant. So like Whip and Miracle grow on it and feeding that plant, when we're not looking at the soil. If you've got nothing in your soil, that plant isn't going to grow as healthy and do as well because it's got nothing to suck up and to feed on. So really making sure that you are putting good compost in at the beginning of your season, adding nutrients to that soil, and really taking care of your soil. Otherwise, it's a garden mistake. Another one, ignoring pest and disease. So not really paying attention to your plants, and like powdery mildew is a perfect example. You will see like a white powder on the outside of your plants, and some people might be like, if you see something off with your plant, do a quick Google search or ask some gardening friends or join a Facebook community where you could ask those questions. Because if we ignore those pests and those disease and those bugs on there, then it can destroy not only our entire crop, but if your neighbor is maybe growing and you've got an infestation of something, it can spread over to them. I mean, it's likely they'll have them anyways, but if you're not taking care of that infestation or that disease, it's going to spread, and it's likely going to take out your entire garden one way or another. And then it's also going to destroy your soil. Because if you get something really, really bad that you don't take care of, it can infect your soil, which also will in turn affect your crop next year if it's still in that soil the following year. So garden mistake that is huge is ignoring that disease and those pests. Make sure you are taking care of those. There's so many organic ways and so many easy ways using things that you already have at home. Like powdery mildew, for example, is something as simple as mixing, I'm going to have a video on that later on, but mixing milk and water or baking soda and water and putting those on your plants. You probably already have that at home anyways. So take care of your plants and do not ignore those diseases. I've got two more mistakes that are common. One of them is planting too close or in a wrong container size. So I use the square foot gardening method. I have a video on that earlier. I can link that as well. But anyways, it's basically using the square foot gardening method to plant and space things properly. Your seed packet typically will tell you on the back how close things like to be together or how far apart things like to be. And a lot of mistakes I see is people ramming things too close together or in a container, putting one too many plants into a container and wondering why it's not growing well. Well, they're crowded. Not only are they not getting the proper sun that it needs, all of those roots are sucking up all those nutrients, and they're all fighting for nutrients and stuff in that soil that those plants just aren't going to get because there's too many in that one space. So make sure to try and follow planting guides and spacing guides as best as you can. Of course, there's always an exception, but just a general, idea. Not trellising things properly is another huge garden mistake. I'm sure all of us have not trellised something properly that's vining and spindling all over the place, and it has taken over everything. I'll talk in a minute about that. I had a mistake this year with that. And the last but not least common gardening mistake, it's kind of a bonus, is people don't label things properly, or they lose their labels. I did it this year, so I can't even say people because people's is me. I highly, highly, highly recommend getting good labels and a marker or a pencil that won't wash off in the rain, and making sure you are labeling stuff. Nothing is worse than not knowing what the heck you're planting, and when it pops up, if you're a new gardener and you're not really familiar with different varieties of what things might look like, you're gonna not know what you're even eating in terms of variety. Or if you want to save seeds, you want to know what it is that you're saving seeds from, because you don't want to trade seeds with somebody and tell them that they're getting a yellow tomato and then they grow it and all of a sudden it's a red tomato. That actually happened to me last year in a seed trade. I was reading the yellow zucchini tag and I planted it and it came up as a straight neck squash and I didn't even know what the heck it was. So I highly, highly recommend making sure to label things properly. Which brings us to mistakes that I made in the 2020 season if you just want to sit and have a laugh. That first one, the labeling. Okay, so it's not that I didn't label everything because I did. What happened is when we got out to the garden, I had dropped my tray of peppers and I had so many varieties of peppers this year and all of the tags fell out and I was like, yeah, well, and all peppers for the most part, hot, sweet, big, little, they all look the same. The leaves all look the same. Like everything. I'm not a pepper connoisseur, so maybe there is a difference, but I couldn't see it. So what I basically did was I planted all of my peppers. I kept all the tags just on the side of the garden. And as they came up, I kind of knew what they were. Luckily, I didn't grow like so thankful that this year I grew habanero and natapinos, which are heatless jalapenos and heatless habaneros. Thankfully, I did not grow actual jalapenos this year because I would, if I had a jalapeno and a natapino sitting beside each other, I would know until I bit into them which one was hot and which one wasn't. So luckily, as they actually flowered and grew fruit, I knew what was what, but that could have been detrimental, especially like in a tomato, because like a black crim, a cherry purple, and Paul Robeson, they all look the freaking same. I would never know which one is which. So anyways, I made that mistake this year. Labels, big problem. The second mistake I made personally this year is I grew sunflowers, and this is the one where I knew better. I am literally watching other YouTubers right now using sunflowers. Jess from Roots and Refuge, if you know, you know. I am watching her use sunflowers to suck toxins out of her soil. She got contaminated soil and she's trying to use sunflowers to help get those toxins out of the soil and release other toxins that sunflowers release back into the soil that help kind of balance it out. I knew that. So why I planted sunflowers in and directly beside brand new blueberry bushes that I were trying to establish is beyond me. And then I wondered why like they didn't do so well. Well, one, they were shaded out by these 12-foot sunflowers, and two, all of the sunflowers were probably just sucking the nutrients right out of that soil and all that, everything that those blueberry bushes needed. So fingers crossed I can get those blueberries to bounce back this year. Oh gosh, that's why I said mistakes happen, and they happen to all of us. And I've been gardening for years, and I still have the time to know what I'm doing. Third mistake, which is a common mistake that I made. I have never grown marigolds before. I wanted to use them as a trap crop for all those Japanese beetles. We have them really bad here in Southern Ontario, at least in my area. So I wanted to use them to deter all of the bugs to my flowers instead of eating my plants, which worked phenomenally, but I planted the wrong type of marigold. I just wanted little marigolds to like go around the border of my bed. Instead, I planted crackerjack marigolds, which ended up being like 4 feet tall. It was horrible. My bad. I should have read the back. I didn't even know until I had already planted them, and I got a message from my friend who I had shared seeds with and was like, hey, did you know that these marigolds were 3 feet tall, 3 to 4 feet tall? Sure didn't. So that's great. And when they came in, what a mess. I ended up hacking half of them down. So there you go. I made a mistake as a seasoned gardener, not reading the seed packets. I have 2 more things that I didn't do great this year. 3, sorry. I let my herbs dry out. I did them in like a tower container and it was really hard to keep them watered. I suggest putting it in a cool spot if you can, because I had a really hard time keeping that watered and a lot of them died. So a mistake on my part. I did not feed my brassicas. Brassicas are very heavy feeders. They like to suck everything out of the soil, and I didn't feed them as well as I should have with what they needed. So they didn't get as big by the end of the season as I wanted them to. I did get like, a fair sized broccoli head, but they really should have been bigger, and that was on me because I didn't feed them towards the end of the season. I garden with illness. I am going to talk about that in a video. And so by the end of the season, I was spent. I had canned and preserved and gardened my face off, and I just didn't, it was, you know what? I'm going to do better this year. I'm going to really try to do better. And last but not least, I used cocoa liners. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but like in my hanging baskets, they're decorative hanging baskets, and I used cocoa liners. It almost looks like straw. Those suck. I ended up having to throw them out at the end of the season for a couple of reasons. One, because they were all deteriorated and picked apart by the birds, and two, they're so drying. If you have any tips or tricks for those, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to use them again, but throw that in the comments and let me know. I've heard of people putting a diaper at the bottom of their soil before they put the soil in, because I guess the diaper helps to absorb the water and keep the soil moist. I don't know if I'm about to do that. I don't know if I'm about to go to my niece and start stealing her diapers, but yeah, I don't know if I'll use them again. They're very drying. It was really hard to keep plants and the soil moist in those cocoa liners. So that's a meh for me. But anyways, if you have any other gardening mistakes that you have made or that you know that people do all the time, drop them down in the comments. I love to share with people. We love to grow together. Thank you so much for watching, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.